Okay, so we are back, and I hope everyone is staying sane. This is our section on costuming, costume design. I hope that you have been watching the videos I sent you. They're extremely informative, and they are from professionals in the industry. Um, uh, I know that you all have the time to, but I know that staying home with family and things like that can kind of make things a little crazy busy. Okay, so let's move on to the part about costuming that'll get us going here. Okay, so costuming we really realize and understand a lot about because this is probably the most common connection we have to the theater and theatrical design because of the fact that we spend more money than we ever have sometimes on what we will be wearing. If you have an event or going somewhere, we're really concerned with how we look and things of that nature. Even though we are less that way today, we still tend to do that a lot. So it's important to look at these goals of the costume or the objectives, either basically kind of the same as our other designers in set and lighting, but you can see some of the differences that are here, and it's important to be familiar with how that pertains to how humans clothe themselves, how we dress, and what that does for us. You can learn a whole lot by what people wear, how they wear it, when they wear it. It really says a lot about people, and that's not a negative thing. It is actually how we learn of each other, especially when we can't physically talk or interact with them like now. Okay, so establishing time and place. We can tell when and where you're going somewhere. We can tell when it's probably morning or bedtime. If you're going out, you're going to a dinner, etc. Setting the social and cultural class of a play. If the play takes place in the 1940s, just because it's in the 1940s, I don't randomly pick something from the 1940s, as the costumer learns about who the person is in the play, meaning the character. Then you would decide what could be an option for the characters. Telling the story of the play as the play progresses. How many changes are there? Do we know if we're in a day? Do we know where we are? How things are moving along in the story? Demonstrating relationship. We can understand relationship by how characters dress. And a good example is you have those friends that you don't care what your hair looks like, and then you have those friends to where you do care what you look like, and that's always shows us a relationship between you and that friend. Specifying characters' social and professional roles. If you're quote unquote white collar or blue collar, those are businesses or activities that say this is your profession. Military is a perfect example of knowing professional roles. If you wear a suit and a tie to work every day, then you probably are not under a car working every day, especially during business hours. Defining style. We talked about uh, realism, surrealism, and abstract. Style really makes a big difference for us. That comes by way of color. It comes by way of being one of these three styles that we just talked about. A great example I like to use is, like, you ever know how in, for example, a sci-fi movie, that the character that is the bad guy tends to always have the most uncomfortable costume, and the characters that are usually the good guys tend to have more comfortable costumes. So there's so many ways that costuming can say, okay, well, that's why this person is bad, or that's why this person is good. It puts them in that category. And then meeting the practical needs of a production. What that means is, if you're in a play and the character is on stage, and again, we're all talking about stage, if a character has to do something a lot on stage and the play has to run 5 or 6 shows a week, then it's important that that character have what they need. For example, if they have to sing and jump and move and dance, and in the play they're supposed to be dressed in something from the medieval times, they may have clothing under, or something adjusted to the needs of the costume so the actor can perform. It is very important because in a movie you can wear the realistic garb and do a film and get the film in, but if you were on stage 2 hours a night and you're constantly going, the costumer needs to know how to make adjustments for the needs of the performer. Okay, so I'm not going to just bombard you with this here, but it's important to note the process for the designer. And I've kind of repeated some things to show you how busy this can be. But obviously, they need to know the script, they need to research, they will do a lot of sketches. Costume designers will create templates, which are basically kind of figure drawings of the characters with the design costume idea on it to help them explain what they want to do and how they want to do it. Then they have a few ways of how they get what they need by either pulling costumes from their stock, purchasing them from rent, or realistic purchases somewhere else, or physically building the costume. That means making it from scratch. So costumers have lots of resources. Please watch the one on the Lion King that I have on the handout that I had emailed to you day before yesterday, and look at that one. You'll really see the details that comes along with that. And the other one where they talk about how someone has to be a shopper. They have to go out and buy the things. A lot of adjusting, a lot of sewing, a lot of creation comes along with things, whether they made it or not. You probably have a family member, your mother, maybe yourself, or someone who builds costumes or builds fabric-based ideas like dresses and things, and it does require a lot of work. And so imagine doing that for a whole group of 50 or 60 as a costume designer. And so they need to understand how to do those things. Making changes, finalizing what they're going to do, taking notes, tweaking it, and going through a process to where they have a plan that gets them to when the play opens, and then a plan that gets them through the play, because you have to wash the clothes depending on how long the play runs, and then what you do after the show, returning, getting things back, things of that nature, and trying to get an idea of how all of that works. Let's see how we're doing here. Okay, all right, let's come back over here. Okay. We talk about composition, we talk about line, texture, and color. These are the very important elements of the composition of putting together costuming. Line is, of course, the line of the garment, line of the figure in the garment. Texture is, of course, the feel. That's important for lighting, especially, and how it's going to feel to the performer. And then color says a lot. Like I said, a lot of times in theater, our bad guys are in warmer, hotter tones, and our good guys are in cooler tones. This is exaggerating, and it's kind of a blanket statement. But these are three elements of costuming that really, really kind of jumps out. When you look at award shows on TV, and you look at parade shows on TV for holidays, the first things that they talk about is what the person is wearing. Look at the line in that dress, Joan. Notice how it flows on the carpet as she walks up. They don't care about the awards, they care about how the costume looks and how it fits on the performer. Now, I'm not going to inundate you with this, but this is just a sheet to look at the different elements. The other added elements that a costumer may be in charge of would be makeup, masks, hair, and wigs. Costumers tend to have these skills because if you look at the Lion King video, you'll see that Julie Taymor, who also designed the costume, also had to understand masks. She is a mask maker as well. And so that's why she fit that production slot very well, even though she was also the director. But you may know how to make the costume, but if the costume requires prosthetics on the face or makeup or hair, and it has to continue into something in that nature, the costumer will either have to collaborate and work with someone who is in that field, or they have to understand that pretty well themselves. And you can kind of see some of the examples of how makeup can enhance a costume, how it can bring out the characters or the actors, how masks can put focus on the body of an actor, because when we have a mask on, we don't get to see a lot of the physical movements of the face. And so these are just some examples here of the details of other extra materials. Jewelry, things of that nature may also be the responsibility of a costumer. It's not just the clothing. It depends on the character, it depends on the play, and like I said, most costumers have secondary talents and skills that allow them to go into these other categories. Accessories, ornaments, fabric, hair and wigs, makeup, masks, and whatever else may need to come in line, prosthetics to elongate a nose or something of that nature. These are materials that come along with being a costumer. And what's amazing about it, as you probably saw in the set design one, is the challenge changes from play to play. These are examples of what costumes suggest in life. Kind of mentioned it at the beginning, but this is important to understand. And if you look at how we do things day to day, we have position and status, gender, occupation, flamboyance or modesty, independence, regimentation, and occasion. These are all how we decide, or what makes our decision on what we wear. Maybe you were that person in high school who liked to wear really flashy, colorful things. Maybe you had that friend who always had to be in glitter, even though it was just test day at school, something silly of that nature. What you're doing as an occupation is what costumes suggest in life. And we also dress, again, as I mentioned before, to make a statement or to be modest, to fit in. It's not as big a deal today as it was 20, 40, 100 years ago, because we have new ways of how we represent ourselves, and typically that happens with our devices. Here's examples of templates. These are scribbled images, ideas. These have to be turned in to a director, but notice here we have examples. These are called swatches. These are torn pieces of fabric that are used to show, okay, I'm going to design this for the character using this and this for the jacket, this for the pants, and this for the vest. And this is so the lighting designer, the set designer, and all the designers involved, especially the director, can touch and feel what's going to physically be on this character. You can put drawing and you can put color all day long, but this is what's going to tell me as a director exactly the consistency, because especially as a lighting designer, I need to know if this is going to reflect light, soak up light, or cause a sheen or something on stage. And sorry about the images, but the idea of being an artist is also part of a costumer's world. They don't have to be perfect in drawing the people, but they do need to be good at really showing us what I should see walking out on that stage. The last slide is called a costume plot. A costume plot is basically a chart that has every single scene, okay, and who's going to be in every single scene and what they're going to be wearing. Now, this is important because as a costumer, it's important to know that, oops, and I lost it. Let's go back. It's important to know that this costume plot helps a costumer lay out the progression of the costume, and that tells them if it needs to be a quick change, a slow change, a fast change, what have you. But then this costume plot also is retained and can be put up backstage for your costume changers or dressers, like you saw in the what was it? It was the Mary Poppins, where they do the quick change. If you haven't seen that video, that's really cool. You see how fast they need to change. That decides how that costume is created. If the actor's going to be in it all night long, then there's not a big deal for change. If they got to go back and forth, then we have to think about change, and we can't let a costume change slow a play down. And a costume plot can help lay that out, plot out the idea. I will stop there with costuming, and I think that'll put us in a good place. And let's see how that does for us, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, and we're just about out of time, But take these bits of information and include this into that, and make sure you look at your videos. Thanks. Have a great day.